Exposed. My son's plan to erase me led to an incredible transformation in just 14 days. Jim sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from him. Every morning, he'd brew coffee strong enough to wake the dead, yet his 19-year-old son, Kyle, rarely joined him. The silence felt heavy, a weight that pressed down harder with each passing day. Jim, a proud factory worker and war veteran, saw himself as the steadfast protector of their small Midwestern town, a man molded by hard work and traditional values. But how could he bridge the growing gulf between him and his son? Kyle's dreams felt like a distant whisper, drowned out by the clatter of machines and the rigidity of Jim's steadfast beliefs. Kyle wanted to explore, to chase something bigger than the factory life that loomed over him like a dark cloud. Meanwhile, Jim remained oblivious to just how trapped Kyle felt. All Jim could see was that he was trying to instill discipline and responsibility, a legacy he believed to be essential. Little did he know, Kyle had made up his mind. He wanted to break free, and he thought distancing himself from Jim was the first step to happiness. Just when things seemed to spiral further from the connection they both longed for, the factory shuttered its operation, closing Jim's world with a finality that shook the very ground beneath him. Heart racing and hands trembling, Jim received the news as if it were a punch to the gut. How could he face his friends, his neighbors, not to mention Kyle? The town had always celebrated its factory workers, and now they were losing not just jobs, but identity. As whispers of what next swept through their small community, Jim felt naked in a world that measured men by their ability to provide. Teary-eyed, he leaned on the familiar faces around him. Those neighbors he'd often ignored, the ones sweeping their porches and mowing the lawn, rallied behind him, rallying with casseroles and heartfelt assurances. Their kindness ignited a spark of hope within Jim. He realized he wasn't truly alone. Around the same time, Kyle, entangled in his own turmoil, observed the hardships his father endured. The factory's closing hammered home truths he tried to ignore. As Jim struggled, his pride and ego stripped away by vulnerability, Kyle began to see the man behind the rigid exterior, a father full of sacrifice and loneliness, love mingled with regret. Over the next 14 days, as meals were shared and laughter occasionally broke through the tension, something beautiful began to form. Neighbors brought food, stories, laughter, each heartwarming encounter sharing not just support, but unveiling layers of humanity Jim never revealed and Kyle never acknowledged. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow.
If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As late-night conversations filled the air, they shared unspoken fears, bursting from the seams, and precious dreams they cherished. An emotional truce began to form, one that urged both to confront the complex fabric of their relationship. Yet, just as the threads of connection seemed to weave tighter, an unexpected hurdle crashed into their newfound alliance, the community meeting that would decide their fate and the future of their small-town legacy. Would it bring them closer, or drive them further apart? With apprehension binding them and persistence, both father and son stood on the cusp of a transformation neither had expected. As the whispers of hope turned into a roaring question of family loyalty, Kyle's heart raced. Would he choose to stay, or finally escape the cycle that bound them both? The community meeting was set for Tuesday night, and as the day dawned, a mix of excitement and dread churned within both Jim and Kyle. Jim pulled on his worn work boots, staring at his reflection in the smudged kitchen window. This wasn't just another town hall meeting. It felt monumental, a defining moment that could either stitch their family back together or sever any thread of connection they had managed to weave. Kyle paced in his room, heart thumping against his chest. He glanced at the old family photos lining the walls, reminders of their simpler times, back when things felt easy and laughter spilled easily between them. He couldn't shake the feeling that something huge was on the horizon. He had to decide if he would confront his father or turn away once more in search of freedom. That evening, the townspeople gathered in the local community center, filling the wooden chairs with anxious anticipation. The hall buzzed with murmurs, a live wire of emotions filling the air. As they found their seats, Jim caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd, Mr. Thompson, his old boss at the factory. The man's eyes spoke of loss and longing, resonating with Jim's own heartache. "Let's listen to what they say," Jim whispered to Kyle as he rubbed his hands nervously against his jeans. Kyle nodded, scanning the familiar faces of neighbors and friends whose livelihoods now lay in the balance. Inside him, a fierce battle raged. He wanted to scream for everyone to start fresh, to embrace change, but the grip of his father's expectations felt like chains around his heart. The meeting began with the mayor's somber tone echoing through the hall, breaking the silence that had settled like a heavy fog. "We will be discussing how we plan to move forward. Losses are severe, but together we can find a way."
With each word, Jim felt a mix of hope and despair. The town was hurting, and as he looked beside him, he saw Kyle's clenched fists. He caught his son's eye, hoping to convey the understanding that had begun to blossom between them. As the discussion circulated, arguments flared and passions boiled. Some wanted a plan to revive the factory, others wished to turn the page entirely. Jim listened intently, absorbing each perspective while struggling to claw back his voice. When finally he stood up, it was like a weight lifted from his chest. "I've worked this factory for over 30 years. I've seen our people thrive here, but we can't forget, we are more than our jobs." His voice cracked, but was steady. "We are family. Our future lies in supporting each other, not merely in surviving the past." Gasps filled the room, some showing shock, while others nodded in agreement. Jim turned, catching Kyle's eye again. He felt a flicker of pride for his father, something he never expected to feel. Then Kyle stood, heart racing. "Dad, I've wanted to talk to you." The room grew still. "It's not just about the factory or the town. I need to figure out what I want in life, apart from your expectations." The raw honesty in his voice resonated through the hall, prompting whispers and exchanged looks. Jim's heart dropped. Every fiber of his being wanted to urge Kyle to stay, to hold on to the life they had, but a deeper understanding settled in his chest. "Son," Jim started, emotions pouring out like unmeasured water, "I just want you to be happy. I don't want to lose you. But maybe I've been holding you back without even knowing it." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the distance between them shrunk, yet Kyle's next words hung like a thin thread between them. "I need to find my way, Dad." Silent tears pooled in Jim's eyes, the weight of impending change breaking against his resolve. Would he be able to accept Kyle's journey, no matter where it led? As the room held its breath, the unspoken bond between father and son hovered, heavy with hope, yet edged with uncertainty. Just as the tension peaked, the sound of the gym doors creaked open, a sudden gust of wind bursting in, signaling an unexpected visitor that could turn the tide of everything they thought they knew. What did this mean for the future of Jim and Kyle? Would they find a shared path? Or were their destinies destined to drift apart? The door swung wide, and the room gasped collectively as a figure stepped into the warm glow of the community center lights. It was Clara, the town's high school principal, known for her fierce dedication to the students and an aura of vulnerability that pulled people in. Jim's heart surged as he caught sight of her, but he couldn't shake the unease that settled in his stomach. "Clara," he murmured under his breath, not quite believing his eyes, but here she was, a beacon in a sea of uncertainty. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "I know we're discussing heavy topics, but I have something to share, something that might change how we view our future together." Kyle shifted in a seat, his tension palpable. He'd known Clara from school, admired her, but never thought she'd step into this fray. She continued, "Over the past few weeks, I've been working with other towns similar to ours that have faced endangerment in their communities. I believe there's hope for us too." The murmurs returned, this time with a hint of curiosity. Jim felt his chest swell. Was it possible that someone outside his circle saw the potential for change when he couldn't? Clara held up her hands for silence. Change begins with partnerships between the youth and their families. I've talked to some of your children, families, and community members about creating a program that involves skills training, mentorship, and career path development, geared towards fostering not just jobs, but new beginnings. An uproar of voices erupted. Some were concerned, others intrigued, but Clara raised her voice to cut through the noise. I believe in our kids' potential. We can use this as a chance to rebuild, not just the factory or our town, but our connections and futures together. Jim's eyes met Kyle's, and a spark ignited between them. The proud look on Clara's face as she spoke was contagious. She wanted a whole town to thrive, pulling them into a vision far bigger than just survival. As Clara laid out her plans, each statement felt like a key unlocking the chains Kyle so desperately wanted to shatter. His heart raced as he imagined getting involved. A future where aspirations weren't just dictated by expectations, but were crafted with intention began to form at the edges of his mind. More discussions ensued, and Jim slowly felt the threads of connection begin to weave tighter. He could sense Kyle's excitement dancing on the edge of his lips. For the first time in years, hope felt tangible. "Kyle, what do you think?" Jim whispered, leaning closer. Kyle hesitated, his face a mix of emotions. "Dad, I think—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Maybe I can find my place here, but it has to be on my terms. Together, we can shape something that fits both our dreams." Jim felt a wave of relief wash over him. Perhaps they were breaking through after all. The meeting continued with discussions of who would be involved, how to implement change, and where to gather resources. As Clara wrapped up, she focused on the hushed crowd, her passion igniting the room. "Let's not see this just as a setback. Let's embrace it as a springboard. If we take this leap together, we can build a place that's not just about work, but is filled with purpose and love." A deafening cheer erupted around them. They stood united, a community awakening to possibility. Jim could hardly believe it. Hope felt almost foreign, yet thrilling.
But just as they began to celebrate their new direction, Kyle's phone buzzed violently in his pocket, its urgent tone slicing through the atmosphere. He pulled it out, and the color drained from his face. "It's Mom," he whispered, panic flickering in his eyes. She's gone." In that moment, the fragile sense of hope shattered, replaced by a weight that eclipsed the room with tension once again. Would they have the strength to navigate this unfolding catastrophe while trying to lead their town into a brighter future? Kyle stood frozen, the phone still clutched in his trembling hand. His world tilted sideways, and Jim could feel the air thicken with despair. The room, once bursting with excitement, now felt heavy with confusion and fear. A shadow settled over them, draping the community's flickering hope in darkness. "Dad, I don't understand," Kyle stammered, his voice cracking. "What does this mean? Where is she?" Before Jim could answer, Clara stepped forward, her instinct to support immediately kicking in. "Kyle, let's take a breath," she said softly, her eyes scanning the crowd that had grown silent. "We can find some answers. Let's not panic right now." But how could anyone not panic? Jim's heart raced. All he could think about was the last time he'd seen his wife, how vibrant she had been, laughing with Kyle about something silly. That wild, beautiful energy was now a haunting reminder of what they could lose. "Do you want to talk outside?" Clara suggested, her tone gently coaxing. Kyle nodded, his tears dangerously close to spilling over. Jim followed, stepping into the cool night air with a rush of dread. They found a quiet corner behind the center. The familiar scent of wet earth and pine mingled with the adrenaline stirring in Jim's chest. Clara leaned closer to Kyle, speaking in hushed tones. "We're going to reach out to the police, okay? They can help us find your mom. You aren't alone in this." But Kyle just shook his head, confusion and fear battling for dominance. "I keep thinking, she was so into her projects. She's been so distant. What if she just doesn't want to come back?" "No," Jim said, stung by that thought but determined. "Your mom isn't like that. She's just going through some things." But even he wasn't sure how deep those things ran. They had all felt the distance, but had weaved around it like a dance, looking for a rhythm. Kyle's breath came in shallow gasps. His hands trembled at his sides. "Dad, what if she's hurt? What if she had an accident?" The words landed heavy in the air, and Jim felt his gut twist. His mind raced. There was nothing about what-ifs that could change the reality they faced. "We'll figure this out," he told Kyle, though both men felt the words fight to escape the mounting pressure in their hearts. Back inside, Clara was coordinating with a few other parents. Jim watched as she swiftly moved from one group to another, her leadership ablaze with determination.
Hope, still flickering, felt both distant and incredibly present. If Clara could mobilize this community, maybe they could catch just a glimmer of light, even in the darkest moment. "I need to try calling her," Jim finally said. He pulled his phone from his pocket. No calls, no texts, just silence. His heart sank further. "Dad, don't," Kyle said, his voice suddenly desperate. "What if she doesn't want to talk to us?" "I have to try," Jim insisted. "I can't just sit here and do nothing." As he hit dial, his heart pounded like a drum. The phone rang, once, twice, and then her voicemail chimed in. "Hey, you've reached Mara. I can't take your call right now." The words echoed in Jim's mind, trickling down like cold water. She was unreachable, just when they needed her most. He managed to leave a shaky message, his voice cracking with every word. "We're scared, Mara. Please come home. We need you." He hung up, feeling the weight of the world pressing on him. Could they really hold their lives together if Mara didn't return? Kyle's face told him the truth. They couldn't. In the chilly silence that followed, Clara approached them with purpose. "Those who will help are on their way, Kyle. I promise we are going to get through this together. You don't have to face this alone." But Jim's mind was on the urgency of the situation as he thought about their future. How could they rebuild when the cornerstone of their family felt so far away? As Clara continued talking about the next steps, Jim stole a glance at Kyle. The boy's eyes brimmed with tears, a mix of fear and hope all tumbled together. Could they find a way to reconcile their dreams, their love, with the looming uncertainty of loss swirling around them? Questions hung heavy in the air as they stepped back into the community center, where the warm light felt more like a hollow glow. How could they ever find hope amidst such darkness? The moment they stepped back into the community center, Jim felt the weight of everyone's eyes upon them. A dozen worried faces turned, filled with concern and uncertainty. No one knew what to say. The silence stretched long and uncomfortable, like a thick fog hanging in the air. Clara moved swiftly, reaching out to one of the other parents. Jim could see the tremor in her hands as she explained the situation, fighting to keep her voice steady. Kyle stood close to his father, his expression a mixture of heartbreak and determination, and for that fleeting moment, Jim caught a glimpse of the young man his son would become, full of grit and passion. "You know," Kyle said, breaking the silence, "Mom always taught us that there's a way through everything, right?" Jim held his breath. The familiar spark of hope lit in Kyle's eyes, a flicker against the suffocating darkness. If we just keep looking, if we don't give up. Jim stepped closer to his son, placing a hand on his shoulder. "That's right. Your mom would want us to fight, to search for her."
He searched his son's face, trying to breathe life into their shared resolve. "We'll find her, Kyle. I promise we'll find her." Just then, a loud commotion at the entrance caught their attention. A couple of officers strode in, their presence commanding immediate respect. Clara quickly gestured to them, and the air filled with a buzz of hushed conversations. Jim turned to watch as the officers approached, their expressions serious, yet supportive. "Good evening, everyone," one of the officers began. "We're here to assist in any way we can. We understand that this is a troubling time for all of you." His voice was steady, yet Jim could feel the underlying tension in the room. The officer continued, outlining their next steps. As he spoke of search parties and outreach, Jim found comfort in the structure. The chaos was being tamed by a sense of order. It was what they needed, a plan, a purpose. But deep down, his fear echoed loud and clear. Would it be enough? Kyle raised his hand timidly. "How can we help? Can we join in the search?" The question hung in the air, raw and pure. Jim felt a wave of pride wash over him. This was his boy, stepping up when fear could have held him down. The officer glanced back at Clara, who nodded in agreement. "Absolutely. All hands make for lighter work. Every set of eyes counts." With that, Jim felt a rush of adrenaline surge through him. They could be proactive. They could fight. He turned to Kyle and saw the spark of hope transform into determination. Let's do it together. As the crowd shifted and began forming into small groups to strategize, Jim and Kyle quickly joined in. They were tasked with mapping out areas to search in pairs. Each conversation buzzed with local suggestions about Mara's favorite spots, places where she might have gone when she needed peace. But with each suggestion, Jim could feel the gnawing fear creeping back in, clawing at the edges of his mind. What if Mara didn't want to be found? What if she was too far gone into the shadows of her own thoughts? These fears simmered beneath the determination, hungry and eager. They set out with the other families, the cool night air wrapping around them. As they walked, Jim's thoughts began to drift. He remembered the last family camping trip they'd taken, the laughter, the stories around the campfire. A picture of Mara beaming in the soft glow of the flames flickered in his mind. "Dad, what if she's in trouble?" Kyle's voice broke through his reverie. "It's possible," Jim replied quietly, the weight of that truth pushing down on him again. "But every day we don't give up is a step toward bringing her back, right?" "Right. We have to stay hopeful," Kyle responded, trying to convince himself just as much as Jim. As they turned a corner, Jim's heartbeat quickened. In the distance, he could see the looming outline of the wooded area Mara loved. The shadows there felt deeper, darker. Fear prickled his skin.
They reached a small clearing, and for a brief moment, the community gathered in silence, preparing to search. Every heart beat loudly. Every breath felt heavy. A whisper of a breeze rustled the leaves, as if the earth itself was holding its breath alongside them. "Dad, what if—" Kyle started again, but Jim cut him off gently. "Let's just focus on what we can do. We'll tackle one moment at a time." Yet inside him, doubt swirled like a storm. If they found something, anything, would it be enough? Would it be the beginning or the end? As they stood there, the night stretched out before them like an expanse of uncharted territory. And in that moment, Jim couldn't shake off the feeling that everything was about to change. But would it be for better or worse? Their search had begun, but what now lay ahead was the question that haunted Jim's heart as they took their first steps into the shadowy depths of the woods. Would their journey through the darkness lead them to the light, or would it expose something far more unsettling? The path ahead was choked with shadows, and Jim hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing on him. He glanced back at Kyle, who stood with his chin lifted, scanning the trees with fierce determination. In that moment, Jim realized how important it was for him to keep his own fear in check. If Kyle was going to muster bravery, then Jim had to do the same. "Let's stick together," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. Kyle nodded, his eyes bright but haunted, as they started moving deeper into the woods. The further they walked, the more the familiar surroundings turned alien. The sturdy trees loomed like sentinels, standing over them, and the ground crunched underfoot, creating an eerie melody that accompanied their search. Jim could feel the tension in the air, thicker than the darkness that surrounded them. It wasn't just the fear of what lay ahead, it was the memories that threatened to drown him. He remembered playing tag with Mara in this very forest, her laughter ringing like music. Now, that joyous sound felt like a distant echo. The twisting branches seemed almost to mock him. Where were they now? Kyle broke the silence. "Do you think Mom's scared?" His voice was small, vulnerable. "Maybe," Jim responded. "But we have to believe she's holding on, that wherever she is, she knows we're out here looking for her." The words tasted bitter on his tongue. He wanted to believe that Mara would feel comforted, but uncertainty gnawed at him. Each step was a battle with that gnawing fear that their search could lead to something terrible. As they entered a more open area, they encountered another group of families, scanning the ground, scanning the trees, their discourse a mix of worry and hope. They exchanged fleeting glances, and Jim felt the collective weight of their desperation. A man nearing Jim's age, a local fireman whose name he couldn't remember, approached him with a nod. "We're about to check the old creek bed."
"It's a place the kids love, and, well, it might be worth a visit." Jim forced a smile, grateful for any lead, but doubt rumbled in his chest. Before he could respond, the fireman continued. "You're doing the right thing, staying together and keeping hope alive. It matters more than we realize." Thank you, Jim managed, his heart racing at the words. There was truth in them, even if he felt like everything was crumbling on the inside. As they moved toward the creek, the sounds of rushing water echoed, competing with the anxious beating of Jim's heart. The path narrowed, and Kyle grabbed his hand. "Look, Dad, over there," he exclaimed, pointing. Jim's eyes followed Kyle's finger to a section of the bank that looked disturbed. Were those footprints? The hopes came flooding in, but so did fear. What exactly did those prints signify? Their presence could mean anything, and with each step closer, his chest tightened. They crouched down to inspect the marks. "Maybe it's Mom's," Kyle whispered, his voice shaking. Jim felt a flicker of hope mixed with dread. "It could be, but let's not jump to conclusions. We need more evidence." His words felt like an anchor, desperately trying to keep them steady amidst the chaos swirling around. As they stood by the water's edge, Jim closed his eyes, allowing the sound of the creek to wash over him. A small part of him hoped for something tangible, an object, a clue, anything that might lead them to her. Suddenly, Kyle gasped, "Look!" Jim's heart raced as he opened his eyes. Kyle had discovered something half buried in the mud. It was small and light, but as Kyle lifted it up, Jim felt a visceral thrumming in his chest. It was a bracelet, Mara's bracelet, the one she never took off. "Dad, what does this mean?" Kyle's voice trembled, each word like a pebble tossed into a vast, dark ocean. Jim's breath hitched. The find held the power to either pull their hearts skyward or plunge them deeper into despair. This could be the sign they needed, or it could be a cruel reminder of their fear. "Let's get it back to Clara," Jim said, fighting to keep his voice steady. But deep down, the weight of what lay ahead loomed larger, demanding answers he feared they may not be prepared to confront. As they made their way back towards the community center, each step grew heavier, as did the question that haunted Jim's mind. Were they a step closer to finding Mara, or were they just spiraling deeper into the unknown? The community center loomed ahead, its familiar facade now feeling surreal against the backdrop of tension that blanketed the forest. Jim moved forward, each stride heavy with uncertainty and dread. He held the bracelet loosely in his hand, its tiny charms brushing against his palm like a bitter reminder of laughter now lost. Kyle walked beside him, his small hand gripping Jim's tightly. "Dad, do you think Mom will come back?" His innocent question pierced through Jim's thoughts. I hope so," he responded, his voice cracking slightly. He wished he could promise Kyle certainty, but all he had was the heavy weight of fear lingering in his chest. As they entered the center, the atmosphere intensified. People were gathering in groups, some heads down, lost in thought, while others exchanged worried glances or whispered fervently. Clara stood at the front, her eyes wild with a mixture of hope and despair. When she saw Jim and Kyle, her ace lit up momentarily, but gravity pulled her features back into worry. "Did you find something?" she asked, rushing towards them. The urgency in her voice hit Jim hard, amplifying the anxiety already coursing through him. Jim held out the bracelet, and Clara's expression shifted. "That's Mara's! Where did you find it?" "By the creek," Kyle piped up, pride glimmering in his wide eyes. "It looked like evidence, like she might have been there." Clara knelt down beside Kyle, examining the bracelet closely. Tears brimmed in her eyes, hovering like a storm ready to break. This could mean she was close. We have to get more people out there. It's a sign." Jim could feel the flicker of hope reignite somewhere deep in his soul. "Should we call the search teams? They need to know." "We should," Clara interrupted, a new energy igniting within her. "The more people we have looking, if Mara's in trouble, she needs them." As they started forming a plan, each person they spoke to drew their hope from the bracelet, weaving it into a renewed plan of action. Jim watched Kyle's little smile grow, and it struck him how this tiny piece of jewelry had ignited a spark of unity among everyone. But as Jim stood back and took in the scene, doubt still gnawed at him. Were they putting too much faith in something so small? What if it was just a cruel coincidence? Deep breath, he reminded himself. For Kyle, they had to believe. The room teemed with chatter, the atmosphere fluctuating between fear and the kind of hope that felt almost sacred. Jim felt a flicker inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Determination. They had to try. "We're not just looking for her," he found himself saying, his voice gaining strength. "We're going to bring her home." The room erupted in a chorus of agreement, and suddenly Jim felt the surge of community, each member bound together by the shared hope of finding Mara. As they began organizing into teams, sobering reminders of reality lurked at the edges of Jim's mind. Every optimistic word had a price. Every small step forward required faith. They were caught in the push and pull of uncertainty, but at that moment, he wouldn't allow fear to have a voice. Before long, the teams were formed, and as people filed out, Jim approached Clara. "What if we can't find her? What if this bracelet—" "Jim," Clara interrupted, her voice steady. "We have to believe in something. If we give up now, we lose everything." He nodded, knowing she was right.
Hope was all they had left. They needed to believe in that first and foremost. As the last of the group departed, Jim turned to Kyle, who was busy packing snacks. "You okay, buddy?" "Yeah," Kyle said, not looking up. "I think Mom's counting on us." A lump formed in Jim's throat. He bent down, meeting his son's eyes. "She absolutely is, Kyle, and we're going to show her how much we care." The light began to fade outside, casting long shadows across the community center floor, echoing the uncertainty that lingered in Jim's heart. He felt a swell of love and fear battling for dominance. Clara turned to them, face illuminated by the soft glow of her flashlight. "Remember to stay together," she reminded them, her tone a mixture of encouragement and concern. A few minutes slipped by, and then the unthinkable happened. Kyle called out, his voice sharp and bright against the stillness. "Look, over here!" Jim's heart leapt as he followed Kyle's eager voice, moving towards a small clearing. What they found there wasn't what anyone expected. Beneath the leaves and tangled reeds, a piece of fabric, a vibrant scrap that looked remarkably like Mara's jacket. Clara's breath hitched, and Jim felt a rush of adrenaline mixed with a pang of hope. This is it. She was definitely here. Yet, with hope came fear. What if the finding meant she was in danger? What had happened in the woods? Questions swirled, but they had only so much time. Jim glanced back at Kyle, who stood wide-eyed, a mix of confusion and hope washing over his innocent face. "Dad?" Kyle whispered, his voice shaky. "It'll be okay, Kyle. We just need to keep going." As they gathered the fragment of cloth, Clara's expression hardened. "We need to call the search teams now. This is a real lead." Just as they began to organize a new plan, the sound of rustling came from nearby. Jim froze, a weight of fear crashing over him. Clara raised her flashlight, casting a beam into the darkness, and everything became stitched tightly with tension. What or who was waiting out there? In that moment, shadows emerged and shifted, as if the secrets of the forest sighed, preparing to lay bare the truths hidden within. "Everybody stay close," Jim said, trying to steady his voice. They had weathered fears together before, hadn't they? But tonight, the forest murmured of something more, something waiting in the dark. As they inched forward, a flicker of movement caught Jim's eye. It was brief but undeniable, and suddenly, as his heart raced once again, he wondered, what if that movement was more than just loss? What if it was a sign of someone returning? What awaited them in the heart of the night? Jim felt his pulse quicken as the rustling grew louder. The forest was alive with echoes, shadows dancing under Clara's flashlight. His instincts screamed at him to pull Kyle closer, to shield him from whatever lurked just out of sight. But curiosity coiled in his gut. Could it be Mara? "Stay right behind me," he whispered to Kyle, gripping his son's shoulder gently. A sense of protectiveness surged through him. They had to keep moving, to confront whatever was hidden in the darkness. Clara aimed the beam of light ahead, revealing a small, dimly lit pathway. "This way," she urged. As they stepped carefully over roots and rocks, Jim felt the weight of the fabric in his pocket, a small reminder of their mission. He clenched it tightly, as if it could fuel their search. The deeper they went, the thicker the air felt, as if the trees themselves were pressing down on them. The forest was both beautiful and terrifying, a place where nightmares could thrive just as easily as dreams. Jim's heart raced, adrenaline pushing him forward, despite the fear gnawing at the edges of his resolve. Suddenly, the rustling stopped. Silence enveloped them like a heavy cloak. Jim glanced back at Clara, her face flickering between determination and fear. "What was that?" she mouthed silently, anxiety in her eyes. "Just an animal," Jim whispered, though a deep part of him wasn't convinced.
He tried to shake the unease that settled over him, but it lingered. Then, as if the woods were responding to their anxiety, a figure emerged from the shadows. A deer, fragile and delicate, its eyes wide and glimmering in the light. For a brief moment, relief washed over Jim, but it was short-lived. The creature bolted away, deeper into the trees. "Let's keep moving," Clara said, regaining her composure. They pressed on, the atmosphere heavier with every step. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a clearing, Jim's breath hitching as he scanned the area. The flickering lights from their flashlights illuminated abandoned boxes and tattered camping gear, but no sign of Mara. A knot of desperation formed in Jim's stomach. He knelt down, rifling through the discarded belongings, praying for a trace that would lead them to her. "What if she's hurt?" Kyle whispered, his voice a shaky thread. "Don't think like that," Jim said, forcing optimism into his voice. "We'll find her." Just then, Clara pointed her flashlight further into the clearing. "Look!" She stepped forward, revealing 2 faint footprints pressed into the dirt, barely visible but unmistakable. They seemed to lead away from the clearing. "This way!" Jim exclaimed, his pulse racing again. The footprints felt like a heartbeat in the silence, a potential path leading them closer to Mara. Kyle's hand clutched Jim's tightly as they followed the trail. "Dad, what if it's a trap?" Jim stopped, crouching down to meet Kyle's gaze. "There's always a chance, buddy. But we can't let fear stop us from looking for her. We have to trust what we found." With each step, the shadows grew longer, but Jim felt a tide of determination rising within him. They were close. He could feel it. It was a tugging in his chest, an ache for reunion. As they moved, the trees thinned slightly, revealing an expanse where the moonlight painted everything silver. But then a noise shattered the stillness, a distant cry, echoing through the trees. It was soft yet haunting, a sound that turned Jim's blood cold. "What was that?" Kyle's voice quivered beside him, a stark reminder of the uncertainty that loomed large. "I don't know," Jim admitted, a knot tightening in his throat. They looked at each other, fear slipping into their shared moment. But they couldn't stop now. They couldn't hesitate. Not when Mara was out there, maybe needing them. Her voice, crying out for help, lingered in the air.
With a deep breath, they pushed ahead once more, hearts pounding, a family forged through their fear, searching for someone they loved. "Keep close," Jim urged, his voice stronger, the darkness steadying their resolve. And as they ventured onward, shadows dancing at the edges, he couldn't shake the feeling that something more than just the forest was watching, waiting. What awaited them next in this tangled web of hope and fear? The darkness loomed thick around them, but Jim felt a pulse of determination in his chest, a beat that synchronized with Kyle's anxious breaths beside him. The shadows seemed to thicken and shift, both men propelled forward by a shared purpose. "Did you hear that?" Kyle whispered, wide-eyed, as they inched further into the moonlit clearing. The distant cry echoed again, crisper this time, woven with urgency. Jim nodded, his heart hammering against his ribs, but he took a deep breath. Every instinct told him they were close to finding Mara, and they couldn't turn back now. In that moment, an unlikely warmth wrapped around Jim. The memories of her laughter flitted through his mind like the flickering light from their flashlights. He thought of all the memories they had shared, the family dinners, the quiet moments under the stars. They had to hold on to hope, to believe Mara was still somewhere out there, waiting for them. "Stay close, Kyle," he urged again, gripping his son's shoulder. They both moved together, the bond between father and son holding stronger than fear as they followed the footprints deeper into the wilderness. Suddenly, the cry rose again, clearer now, breaking through the underbrush that surrounded them. It was a sound that chipped away at Jim's heart and pierced through the chill of uncertainty. "Mom!" Kyle exclaimed, his voice strained and desperate. "Shh, listen," Jim hushed, his breath caught in his throat. They paused, straining to hear. There it was again, a faint sound that resembled a call, yet muffled, almost a plea. It sent a chill down his spine. "Which May?" Kyle asked, panic flickering in his eyes. "It's coming from over there," Jim pointed,
to a narrow path that seemed to narrow, twisting like a thread into the heart of the trees. With resolve, they moved forward, each step weighted with the urgency of their mission. After what felt like an eternity, they arrived at a small clearing encircled by towering trees, the moonlight spilling onto the earth like a soft spotlight. And there she was. Mara knelt on the ground, her hair disheveled, face pale but alive, her expression a mixture of bewilderment and relief. She looked up just as Jim and Kyle stepped into the open space, a flicker of recognition brightening her eyes. "Jim! Kyle! Mom!" Kyle cried out, breaking free from Jim's grasp and sprinting into her arms. Jim felt his heart swell with a mix of joy and anguish, the moment they had fought for, the moment that seemed almost impossible. "Mara, what happened?"
"Jim," breathe, moving swiftly to wrap them around them both. Time fell away, and all that mattered was the warmth of family amidst the cold night. "I'm so sorry," she murmured through tears, holding her family tightly. "I wasn't myself. I just needed to escape." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. They had all been searching for answers, but perhaps more importantly, they had been searching for one another. "It's okay," Jim whispered, tears blurring his vision. "We're here. We found you. We're not letting you go again. Not now." Kyle pulled back slightly, wiping his tears and looking up at his mom, the innate sweetness shining through his relief. "We were so scared." Mara's emotion-filled gaze softened. "I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry for putting you through this. I just needed time. I lost myself for a while." Those words struck a chord in Jim, fighting against the inevitable walls they had built around one another. In that moment, surrounded by family, something shifted in all three of them, a realization that their true strength lay not only in their individual selves, but in the fabric of love that bound them together. They began to walk back toward the community, the path ahead lit by moonlight and filled with the vigor of new hope. Each step felt lighter, their spirits buoyed by the reunion, but also something deeper, a resolve to bridge the gaps that had formed. As they emerged from the forest, the site of the community center glowed like a beacon, welcoming them back as if celebrating their return. People who had been searching for them rushed forward, hesitant but hopeful. They were greeted with cheers, yet a weighty understanding hung in the air. Jim held Mara's hand firmly, recognizing the journey that lay ahead. It wouldn't be easy to heal the wounds they had all endured, but this moment, this was just the beginning. "Together, we'll figure it out," Jim assured Mara, wrapping an arm around Kyle, who nodded fervently. Everyone around them shared murmurs of relief, excitement, and even tears of joy. The community, once distant after the factory's closure, felt like a family knit closely together through this journey. Clara stepped forward, her eyes reflecting admiration and warmth. "You're safe now. That's what matters most." Jim realized that they had gone through the fire and come out forged stronger. The community was more than a place. They were a collective heartbeat, one that pulsed with love and determination. As night drifted into dawn, there was a sense of renewal that replaced lost hopes. Jim looked at Kyle and Mara, seeing not just relief, but a spark of connection he had long yearned for. "Let's turn this moment into something special," he said, feeling the buzz of possibility transform into a quiet promise. Their family would become just as vital as their community, working together, holding on to dreams while facing each challenge side by side. Together they would rise from the ashes. Together they would inspire, heal, and grow. At that moment, Jim knew they were no longer just searching for a way forward. They were living it, creating a beautiful, interconnected tapestry of life ready to embrace all that the future promised. Now, be sure you don't let this moment slip by. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you won't miss the next exclusive stories that will inspire your heart. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others find this journey of hope. And comment below your reactions and feelings about this ending. Your voice matters. Don't wait not even one more second to share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who are on their own quest for transformation. Only true fans understand how important it is to support the channel. Join us in this beautiful adventure.